You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Tuesday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group, and we are going to continue on with our spring position preview, spring ball position preview. I don't know why that was so difficult to get out, but it was. Anyway, today we are going to do tight ends and interior defensive linemen. We already did the edge rushers. I confirmed we need to do the rest of the defensive line, so that is what we're going to do. Zuri is here for all of it, apparently. So yeah, let's we will do that. So let's dig into that. Let's start with the tight ends. And I pulled the roster up in advance so we don't have the internet issues that we had yesterday. It took like 40 minutes before the internet came back up so I could upload the podcast after it was said and done recording. It was fun. It was a fun time. So tight ends. Just want to make sure I have everyone here listed that's on the spring roster. So it obviously starts with the one returning tight end, and that's Colston Loveland, who really excelled as a receiver. That's what he played in high school at Gooding, Idaho. But less so when he was asked to be more of a blocker. That said, Michigan's long had guys that could that was, one or the other. Obviously, optimally, they would be able to do both. And most of them, even the receiving types that Michigan's had more recently, have been good at blocking, or at least been willing blockers. Eric Gall comes to mind, of course, but Nick Eubanks struggled with the blocking, but he was more of a receiving tight end. So you don't necessarily absolutely need a guy that's going to be able to do both, but you hope you do. You would rather have a Luke Schoonmaker that is adept at a blocker and can catch than a guy that can catch and maybe isn't as good of a blocker, especially because Michigan's going to be so run heavy. So Colston Loveland had a solid first year. I think he came along a lot faster than anyone would have predicted. You consider his offer sheet. He had Alabama, LSU, even coming out of Idaho. I think that all kind of makes sense that he would be as good as he was, but you don't necessarily expect a freshman tight end to be able to come in, make a big play and get a touchdown against Ohio State, make a big play, get a touchdown in the Big Ten championship game. Certainly he wasn't perfect. He had his moments, ups and downs, as any freshman will. But as we always say on this show, you make your big improvement, your big jump from year one to year two. So I am excited to see where he goes as far as that's concerned. Now, the guy that might usurp him as the main target, the main starter, I think could be A.J. Barner, the transfer from Indiana. Now, this is where we're really going to test the internet because I don't have this screen up because I just decided I wanted to bring this up. Now, his stats were not as impressive as Colston Loveland's, but he was playing at Indiana, even though it was a pass-heavy. It was certainly a pass-heavy situation there. At least at the first for the first like third of the season, 330, 197, 364, 280. 223, 203 against Michigan, 315 against Maryland, and then it dropped off. That's the passing numbers for Indiana. And then they never went above 210 the rest of the way. So obviously that wasn't working for them, and they went to a more run-heavy offense. But A.J. Barner was the sixth leading receiver a year ago for Indiana, 28 receptions for 199 yards, 7.11 yards per catch, 3 touchdowns. So again, not necessarily eye-popping numbers. That's less than Colston Loveland. The year before, he was fifth, 13 catches for 160 yards. It's 12.31 as far as the average there. And then, before that, he was behind Peyton Hendershot and wasn't on that list. So doesn't necessarily pop off the page when it comes to his receiving. But certainly is a guy who is thought very highly of, as well as a leader. I mean, he was one of the guys that came to Indianapolis last year for Big Ten Media Days. So he's a guy that was thought very highly of in Bloomington. And I can foresee a situation where he ends up being more of that guy than Colston, but Colston's still not going to go away, right? Michigan has the quality problem of having two tight ends, like they technically pretty much always have under Jim Harbaugh. So I expect Barnard probably to play more of that Schoonmaker role. Colston Loveland will continue to play his own role / the Eric All role. And I think that's going to bode very well for them as far as the starters. Behind them, I would say, is Max Bredesen, the younger brother of Ben Bredesen, the walk-on, who got a lot of time this past year. He was the top, I think it was pass blocking tight end in the country, but really suffered with run blocking. If I'm memory serves, it was one or the other. So certainly needs some work as far as that's concerned. But last year was really his first sense of playing time in games. Again, even from year 1 to year 2, from major playing time year 1 to year 2 as well. Certainly he's going to be involved. He was already involved last year, even in game 1 when Eric All was out there. So I fully expect him to be a big part of what they are trying to do there as well. Now, the one that I'm really curious about is Matthew Hibner. He's in his senior year, former 4-star, Burke, Virginia, who we haven't really seen outside of at the end of the Illinois game, not making catches, but he was out there and making a very pivotal fumble recovery on the kickoff against Maryland in week 4. So I think that he's kind of an X factor. It'll be interesting to see what he's able to do if he ends up being a big part of the offense now that it's his senior year. Every time I ask about him, every time we've gotten Grant Newsome, it's like, oh, he's right there. He's right there. It's just the guys that are behind him. But then again, he got, passed over by Max Bredesen. So I'm curious, but he's got that size, 6'5", 245, looks like a college tight end. So it's just a matter of him, the lights clicking on. But behind them, you've got Marlon Klein, who's a sophomore from he's from Germany, but he played high school ball in Georgia. This is his second year. And then you've got Zach Marshall, the early enrollee true freshman from Carlsbad, California. So I don't know which ones are necessarily, if either or are going to be able to have that opportunity. I'm not forgetting about Hunter Neff, the walk-on. He's a grad student. He's from Chelsea, Michigan, right down the street. But he got a lot of talk about by Jim Harbaugh last year in fall camp. And there's others that are, in that as well. But I'm curious to see more so with Zach Marshall, how he'll do this spring, because remember, Colston Loveland had a big catch in spring ball, and it kind of was a precursor of what was to come. He had DJ Turner draped all over him, came down with the ball, and it was a precursor of things to come. Could Zach Marshall be that guy, 3-star from Carlsbad, California? We'll see. But it's good that he's been around. I mean, he was in bull prep and all of that stuff, so he'll be a little bit more seasoned than Deacon Tonielli the 4-star when he arrives in summer. So, all right, that's going to do it for our tight ends. We're going to move on to defensive tackles here in just a moment. Before we do that, you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, then you got to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays, and I know my goal is to eat a little healthier this year. If you're like me, where you want to eat healthier but don't want to compromise taste, then man, I've got just the thing for you. You've got to try Built. Healthy is actually tasty with Built. Seriously, they're so delicious, you won't think they're good for you. Perfect for your New Year's resolution. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they're covered with 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. What's even better is that they're healthy. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't have to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com. Now you can get them at your local Walmart or at Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're close to Sam's Club, run in and grab a box of 13-bar box, of our hit flavors, brownie batter, and churro. You can thank me later. tell you what, I went and looked at the new space today. We had the home inspection. And it was the first time that I've been back since the open house, which was like a month ago. And it's me trying to figure out how I'm going to work out the space. The studio that we're going to have eventually is going to be insane. It's going to be, I mean, as state of the art as you can have in a home, but it's probably going to take 9 months for us to get there. So I'm trying to think, like, in the meantime, because like the area the studio is going to be in is the 600 square foot space attached to the garage, that's down to the studs, vaulted ceilings and everything. But it's ready to be done. But the question is how quickly will it be done? But be prepared for the space to I mean, you'll still have all the cool lighting if you're watching and stuff like that, but it might be, I might be cramped up against a wall. I don't know if I'm going to go up into the loft area or if I'm going to do it in the second bedroom. It'll be interesting to see how that turns out, but I'm excited. Hopefully that'll start in a month. I don't know when my closing date is yet. So, all right, let's move on to the defensive tackles, the interior defensive linemen, not the edge rushers. We've already done those. If you didn't listen or watch that, you can go back and do that. So this isn't going to be a big surprise, right? Like, we know the guys that you expect to be big time players this year. Starts with Chris Jenkins, one of the best run stopping defensive linemen in the country. Was projected to be an early round pick if he would have left early and decided to come back. And with him, I think you're going to get some leadership. And this is his senior year. So I'm very excited for his potential because I think that he can do a lot. And I'm excited to see if he's able to up his game a little bit more. Like, because you can be as good as he was, but take that next step. Think Mo Hurst. The anti-cough drink there. Think Mo Hurst. If Michigan can get pressure regularly from the interior, that takes the pressure off of the edge rushers and gives them more opportunities. Mo Hurst certainly provided opportunities for Chase Winovich and Rashawn Gary, but it was more of the Chase Winovich getting after it thing. And then behind him, you really got three guys that you figure are going to be heavy in the rotation. And the first name that comes to mind, obviously, is Mason Graham. Mason Graham did things in his freshman year as a defensive lineman that you do not expect a freshman to do. That is, it's a blessing, is the best way I can put it. It doesn't get any better than having a freshman defensive lineman come in and play like a seasoned veteran the way that Mason Graham did. Remember my year 1 to year 2 caveat. It could be scary. It seemed like whenever Michigan was going up against a 4th and 1, they're putting Mason Graham out there and he is blowing it up. That is awesome news. Part 2 of the gift from the football gods. I know that Jim Harbaugh said that it was him that he was referring to. I do still believe that he was referring to Kenneth Grant. Because he did make the caveat later. It's like, well, it's really 2 guys. Kenneth Grant has things that you can't teach. Size to go along with speed. On the spring roster, he's listed at 6'3", 356. Biggest player on the team. Now, if he can make that year 1 to year 2 jump, and they're going to count on him doing it, he's going to be out there. That could be really scary. You're in a situation with these interior defensive tackles where it could be okay. I think that's the floor. It could be pretty good. Or it could be just flat out elite. Kenneth Grant might not be as tall as Jordan Davis, but if he figures out how to utilize everything, figures out the technique and the smarts and all of that, and can stay out on the field, it could be something. Told you. It's bad. It could be something. let's not forget about the fourth guy here. That's Rayshawn Benny, who really took a big step forward by the end of the season. Remember, it was Rayshawn Benny and his play that created the interception opportunity for Taylor Upshaw against Ohio State. It was his pressure that was getting there. And he's in his third year now. He was part of a trio of talented players from 2 classes ago. Now there's only 2 of them left. But it's usually when you're looking at defensive tackles, you're normally looking at guys to come on strong in year 3. Usually. That's when Chris Jenkins started coming on. Really, this last year. I mean, he had some spot duty the year before. Kind of similar to what we saw from Mason Graham, essentially. Mozzie Smith really came on his junior year. That's usually when they're saying, we're going to count on you, on top of the fact of now you know what you're doing and you're built to do this. So this really could be a standout year for Rayshawn Benny, especially considering we saw the lights turn on later in the year. He went from, I'm not really playing a lot, to he's getting some key moments in key games. Still didn't play as much as Mason Graham did down the stretch, but made some key plays, was definitely a difference maker. Let's not forget, too, Mike Elston is entering his second year, and he's got an amazing track record of developing guys. So having a second year with Mike Elston could be super beneficial for all parties involved. There's the consistency there. They know exactly what he's asking them to do. So this is kind of also a prove-it year for Mike Elston. There's other guys that certainly could be in the mix as well that we haven't talked about yet. Cam Good got some late time in the TCU game. He's back. He's a grad student, the transfer from UCF. He's a little behemoth, if that makes any sense. 6'2", 323. He doesn't look as big as far as like the height. Obviously, he's not as big height-wise, but he just is. He's a lot of girth in the middle. If he can take that step forward, that would be beneficial. Ike Iwunnah, he's entering his third year. 3-star from Texas. Late commitment in that cycle. 6'3", 321. If the lights turn on for him, that's huge for Michigan as well. So, and then you also have, it covers everybody except for walk-ons and, which is the only walk-on here listed is Peter Simmons, and Alessandro Lorenzetti, who came in as an offensive tackle. This is his second year, and he is 6'5", 289 according to the spring roster. We switched him over now. They clearly see something in him that they think could work. Does he get involved? We'll find out. So, overall, what is my overall outlook for both the tight end and defensive tackle groups? Let's get to that here momentarily. Before we do that, the midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for they let you NFL combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlays. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockdown. That's FanDuel.com/lockdown to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, we didn't necessarily do this with some of the other shows. I mean, we kind of talked about what I thought that they could be, and we kind of touched on it with both the tight ends and the defensive line here. So realistically, and we're in spring, so it's all very variant, on what they're able to accomplish now. Of course, that is a precursor to what happens in the fall, and certainly there's some unknown to some degree because you lose both Eric All and Luke Schoonmaker. Granted, Eric All played in all of one game last year. Luke was pivotal, even like with his injury down the stretch. And at defensive tackle, you lose Mozzie Smith. You also lose George Rooks, but he only had really one big contribution as far as in-season production, and it was a fumble recovery. But which was huge, week 3. Kind of thought that might be the sign that the lights were turning on for him, and just as quickly he's gone. But now you're in a situation where you've got some familiar faces mixed with new faces on both sides. Now, I think that AJ Barner could be the sneaky instant impact transfer that not as many people are talking about that should. He might be my favorite of all of these incoming transfers. We'll see what Josiah Stewart does, because he might also be that. I know most people are thinking about Ernest Hausman, and I think that's with good cause. But I'm much more excited about the potential that AJ Barner has in this offense, because he brings a leadership component that I think would be missing by not having your senior leaders and trusting solely on Colston Loveland. And if Colston Loveland can find that next gear, if he can learn to block a little bit better, I think that this tight end group might not take a step back at all. It might be right on that same page, especially when you have JJ McCarthy throwing to them. The blocking part is key. That defensive tackle, it's a little bit different. Sorry, just got to keep getting drinks here as I keep from coughing. Defensive tackle, it's a little bit different just because I'm not as optimistic as I should be given everything I said about this group, just because Mozzie Smith was that good. He didn't always show up on the stat sheet, right? But he demanded extra attention. He was the leader there. Can Chris Jenkins kind of replicate that, even though he's got a different frame, is playing a different role? It's possible, maybe even plausible. I think, though, the potential is that it can be a much better group due to the other 3 guys that I've mentioned, Mason, Kenneth, and Rayshawn. It has that potential. And really, Mozzie's the only one you lost. I think what helps these guys to really be able to step in and do what's necessary and to be able to become those game wreckers is the slate, much like last year, has got a pretty decent buildup. You do get the at Nebraska, at Minnesota, but neither of those teams are as scary as they've maybe necessarily been. Even Nebraska in 2021, despite the record, was a team that nobody wanted to play, right? They were in close games every single game. Last year, not so much. New coach, Matt Rule will get them up and running probably pretty quickly. Will it be by week 5? I don't know. That seems like a tall ask. And then you got Minnesota in week 6 without Tanner Morgan, Mo Ibrahim, and all of that. So outside of that, you've got really half the year to kind of get things figured out. You're not going to see a really great physical line probably until that Minnesota game as far as offensive lines. And that's just me assuming, because Minnesota has tended to have great offensive lines. So if you can get that worked out in those first 5 games, that's huge. I think that the defensive tackles have an opportunity to be better than last year, but ultimately I think it probably be about the same. Maybe a slight step back, maybe. But a lot, I think that if Chris Jenkins is what we think he could be, it could be scary again. So that's the good thing. All right, that's going to do it for us today. We'll be back on Wednesday previewing whatever I feel like previewing that day as we continue our spring position preview series. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.